This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hey guys, Jay here, welcome to Eons of Battle. This weekend I went to a Warhammer 40,000 tournament. My first tournament, my first experience with competitive Warhammer 40k. I guess I have a lot of experience with competitive 40k because I play Sean so much, but it was a tournament for Combat Patrol and it was very, very fun. But first, squares are the building blocks of websites, and today's sponsor, Squarespace, knows all about them. Squarespace allows anyone to break into website design with easy-to-use features and professional support from start to finish. Looking through the dozens of award-winning templates on offer, you can customize the look and design of your website with ease. And with Squarespace's patented Fluid Engine system, it's a breeze to design a website you can truly call your own. Squarespace's system allows you to stretch your creativity through tools like drag and drop features so you can really freestyle your way to the website of your dreams. Squarespace offers a free trial for you to dip your feet into and test the waters when you're ready to dive in head first. You can follow the link in the description below or type in squarespace.com/eonsbattle to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. This tournament was a super friendly 14-player tournament at the local Warhammer store, and I was actually really nervous because I think I'm okay at Warhammer 40k, but I feel like I have a very tenuous grasp of the rules because Warhammer is so open. Like, you can do anything, but there's always some sort of a rules interaction that you're actually doing. And I was really nervous that I would just not know something or I would miss something, but it was friendly enough that actually it seems like everybody was in the exact same boat. And I think that's just how Warhammer is, that nobody except like the very top grand tournament players actually know every single possible interaction. It was a 3-round tournament and my first game went okay. I walked in the door and immediately started playing. And so I was playing my Necrons against Tyranids. The Tyranid Combat Patrol is spicy with 30 miniatures in it. And the Termagants can actually resurrect D6 models a turn. And if the squad gets wiped, it can actually return to the board for 1 CP. And it returns with 2 D6 models in the unit. It's really powerful. Actually, speaking of power, so Combat Patrol is supposed to be perfectly balanced, and because Games Workshop kind of rewrote the rules and actually changed certain Combat Patrols to fit into the new style, they have the ability to make it perfectly balanced, I feel like. And I really doubt it is perfectly balanced because getting to play so many different factions and seeing all of the Combat Patrols on display, and I did read all of the different Combat Patrols that people were bringing to the tournament, it's hard to believe they're actually balanced, especially because Combat Patrol is written separately from Warhammer 40k, and so the new balanced data slate changes didn't necessarily make their way over to Kill Team or to Combat Patrol. Some of them did, like the overall changes to the Warhammer 40k core rules, but none of the actual changes made their way into the Combat Patrol indexes. And so some stuff feels incredibly overpowered. Like Eldari still get all 12 of their dice. Their fate dice feels like too many free dice. I mean, the Combat Patrol is a quarter-sized game of 40k, so they should probably get a quarter of the number of their fate dice. But no, they got a full pool of 12 fate dice to use. Poor Leagues of Votann Combat Patrol seems really, really lame. It's like 19 models of 4-up save, toughness 5, but the Combat Patrol player did not do super hot in the tournament. And one thing I definitely learned about Combat Patrol is getting to do extra activations is the most powerful thing. And not every faction actually gets great access to these stratagems. The Blood Angels Combat Patrol gets access to the Flamestorm Gauntlet Aggressors. Not that good in 40k proper, but really good in Combat Patrol because their weapons have Torrent, and so they skip the to-hit phase. So if they overwatch, they're overwatching at their just normal shooting. So they're essentially getting to double shoot every turn, and it's really, really powerful. The Gene Steeler Cult Goliath Rock Grinder also has a great damage characteristic on its Rock Grinder truck, and so it can tank shock and essentially get 2 fights every single turn. It's incredibly powerful, and not every single index actually gets access to those extra activation rules, and you can feel them on the tabletop. They're really, really powerful. My first game against Tyranids, we both played somewhat poorly. I forgot some of my stuff, he forgot some of his stuff, he forgot to shadow in the warp. I don't know if it would have been a big deal. It probably would have been, because knowing me and rolling dice, I would have failed all of my battle shock tests for sure. But overall, the game was actually a tie, which felt pretty good because that's kind of the best I've ever done at Warhammer 40k. But the game was a tie, and the day started off feeling a little bit lame because we tied on points. We both killed stuff, we both claimed our primaries and secondaries, but then I ended up winning the round because my models are painted and his weren't, and we actually played with the rules. If your army is painted, you get an extra 10 points. Didn't feel really good to win that way because it's not my generalship, it's just I happened to paint these models in high school, and so I just happened to have them ready to go. That felt a little like a bummer. But then moving on to turn 2, it was me against the Blood Angels player. I got stomped, absolutely clobbered. The Necron Combat Patrol is a little bit interesting. We get the Doomstalker, which was absolutely the MVP of my whole day. Arguably, this model is way too good to be in Combat Patrol. Toughness 8, whole bunch of wounds, 4-up invulnerable save, which probably shouldn't even be printed. It's so ridiculously powerful. Unfortunately, this is essentially the only good thing in my Combat Patrol, because it is the Doomstalker, a 10-man blob of warriors, Scorpek destroyers, and 3 Scarab Swarms. The Scarab Swarm bases, unfortunately, do not get access to their ability to reduce the objective control of other units, so they're kind of just a whatever unit. They can't really punch. They're very fast, but they can't hold objective, so they could help me score secondaries, but unfortunately, the Necron secondaries are actually also pretty rough. The clear winner is get my models into the enemy's deployment zone, and then I just start scoring points every single turn. Sounds amazing, but with such small battles, it's actually really hard to pull that off. I ended up using the worse secondary, where I pick a objective in no man's land, and then I have to kill enemy units that are holding that particular no man's land objective. Surprisingly, I actually scored that quite a few times. These battles are over. They're so vicious and they're over so quickly that you kind of don't have all 5 turns of proper 40k with so many different units. You don't really end up covering the entire board by the end of the game. It's kind of just you march at each other and you see whatever sticks. But the Doomstalker was absolutely amazing. The Blade Angels player turn 1 easily wiped out my entire army, but then literally this thing just kept marching up the board, his entire army shooting at it, doing basically nothing. Combat Patrol, this model gets resurrection, or it gets reanimation protocols, so it's resurrecting D3 wounds a turn. So this thing is just marching up, his entire army is shooting at it, and in turn 5, it finally went down. It was actually kind of a really fun game still, but yeah, I scored 5 points to my opponent's 60, and then plus 10 for Painted Army. He had a perfect game. At that point, I was pretty much out of the tournament because I scored essentially no points for my second game. Technically, I scored 15 for having a painted army. But then moving into my game 3, it was against Genestealer Cult and a lovely, lovely player named Luigi, who was awesome. He also wrecked me with the Genestealer Cult. I actually got first turn in my third game, one of the very few times I've ever gotten to go first in Warhammer. And I did okay my first turn. I killed some stuff. I moved everything onto objective. I decided to, because I have so few Necron models and almost no shooting. It's actually the 10-man Necron warrior squad, and this is the only shooting in my whole army. So I kind of just kept it all blobbed up and moved onto my the objective in no man's land while leaving this guy on my home field objective. And I did okay. But then in his turn 1, he came in and he wiped most of my army. Aberrants are tough, man. I shot his Aberrants with this guy, and I took the squad all the way down to 2 models remaining. And I thought once they were down to 2, I'm like, I can kind of just move on now because it's just 2 Aberrants. They're probably not going to make or break this game. And now I'm going to focus on everything else. The Aberrants wrecked. They charged into my warriors, and they almost finished off my warriors, and then the next turn they finished off my Necron Overlord, which also, the Necron Combat Patrol is bizarre because the Overlord does not get his Resurrection Orb. Instead, he gets the Tachyon Arrow, which is a single-use, strength 14 single-shot weapon which actually, honestly, his little wrist rocket was probably actually the MVP because I fired it every game and it always did its job. Holy cow, it nearly destroyed the Blood Angel's repulsor instantly. Like, it was a glorious little weapon. But yeah, after I shot that, my army goes incredibly far down in its death power of shooting. The game was over. Actually, the game wasn't really over quickly because even though my entire army was dead turn 2, this sucker was still alive and walking around the board. And his entire army, I almost whittled his army down to nothing because every turn this would kill something. And he would just keep pounding away at it, and he did not manage to get this model killed before the end of turn 5. It was absolutely glorious. Combat Patrol is a really, really fun scenario to play 40k in. It's so quick. Our turns were an hour and a half for every round, and we did not need it. Almost none of my games really went longer than like 50 minutes. We were playing pretty quick. The only army that seemed to struggle was demons and Tyranids because their armies are huge. The Tyranid has, I think, 30 models in its army, and then the demons are pretty close, probably like 25, 26 models. Like larger armies, it did seem like they took a long time to play. I don't know if either of the Tyranid players actually finished in an hour and a half for all of their games. They might have been playing a little slow, but it is 30 models. I think for 30 models, you have to start being like, I'm gonna measure the first 2 Termagants, and then I'm just gonna push the other 18 of them across the board because it's a lot of models, and none of them really die because some of them are very good. You got the Barb Gaunts, you've got the Von Ryan's Leapers, Psychophage. Like the Tyranid one is very, very powerful, but it was a lot of fun. Being knocked out of the tournament essentially turn 2 because we were being judged on how many points we actually acquired throughout all of our games. Obviously, winning would give you a huge advantage because you definitely got more than your opponents, but scoring almost none and then scoring almost none again. I wonder if I can. I think I may not have come in dead last. I might have though. I didn't ask the Votan player how many points he got. He got stomped in all 3 of his games, but he might have scored more points than I did. It was kind of a brutal tournament, but the overall winnings, Demons actually came in first place, followed by Blood Angels, and then brought up by the Tau. I really wish I got to play the Tau Combat Patrol because it looked really fun, and I kind of want to buy it because the Ghost Keel battlesuit is one of the coolest models in all of Warhammer 40k. But I almost want to host my own tournament now because I feel like if you like really put the pedal to the metal, you could get so many games in, about 50 minutes a game, just crank through as many games as possible. And it was really fun to experience all of the different games of Warhammer 40k as opposed to just getting stomped by the Imperial Guard weekend after weekend. Our Warhammer tournament had some secondary objectives to the overall tournament because there was also a painting competition and a best general. I got best painted for my army, which I kind of almost wish that I got a, like, you lost the tournament overall trophy. I think that would have been really fun to have on the shelf, but it was really fun. I really liked it. It was definitely, I mean, it all happened in like over the course of an afternoon, as opposed to if it was a 30 or a proper Warhammer 40k 2000 point tournament. Like, I know they can play fast, but still, like a whole day, if not multiple days of Warhammer sounds rough. Where Combat Patrol is really fun and it flows really quickly. I would say the critique of the tournament was there was almost no terrain. Every board had about 5 pieces. And honestly, I think you should play Combat Patrol with triple the amount of terrain that you would think you need, because if it's just a shooting fest immediately, you get a very, very killy early turns, where you should probably have enough terrain where turn 1 is mostly boring in positioning, which would probably lead to better games. But yeah, it was a Warhammer store with a smattering of terrain. Our manager did his best, but I think he literally used like every single piece of terrain he had, and it was not nearly enough for all 14 of us to have perfect terrain layouts. I want to play a lot more Combat Patrol, also just to get a sense of the actual balance of the game. I don't think tons and tons of people are playing Combat Patrol, and certainly not in a competitive sense, which also seems a little bit funny to say, but like Kill Team is an incredibly tight, balanced, competitive game. And so I don't really see why Combat Patrol couldn't also be a tight, balanced, and competitive way to play 40k. And it actually takes a reasonable amount of time and you get to have fun and experience all the different like fun things that come with games of Warhammer 40,000. I have a hunch it's not balanced. Once again, poor Leagues of Votann. I mean, they could probably just do like round 2 or version like 1.1 of all of the Combat Patrol indexes because just some things feel a little bit too good. Also, you're limited to specific stratagems. Like each faction only has 3 faction stratagems, but you still have access to all of the ones out of the core book. And the armies that can really take advantage of the stratagems out of the core book seem to have a leg up over some other armies. Also, as much as I love Doomstalker, this model is ridiculous in Combat Patrol. Honestly, if they just got rid of this model and actually filled out the Necron Combat Patrol with some more units that can actually do things, I think that would probably be better than just one absolutely unkillable monster and almost nothing else in the army. The Scorpek Destroyers. I wanted them to be awesome, and they kind of are, but being only close combat with a decent but slow movement of 7, they would often lose models before they actually made it to where I wanted them to be, and then they would just die. Also, the Necrons seem to have really, really bad faction stratagems because they just never seem to matter. I can increase the objective control of units, which could be very useful on the Scarab Swarms, but my Scarab Swarms didn't really live long enough to take advantage. Plus, I can add +1 to the strength characteristic, which, it would be very useful if something decided to charge my warriors, and so I could give them strength 5 attacks on their just robot fist punches, but it's no good on the Scorpek Destroyers because they have a natural strength of 6. The jump from 6 to 7 never really matters. It doesn't get through past the threshold. Like 7 to 8, huge. All of a sudden you're wounding on 2s. 6 to 7, it doesn't change your dice rolling, so there's no point to actually popping it. And the last army stratagem is giving a unit a 5-up invulnerable save. That one could be useful if they decide to shoot at a unit that, like if they decided to shoot like a missile or something at my Necron Warriors or my Scorpeks, but 5-up invulnerable save is also pretty darn easy to fail. And my Necron Overlord and this guy already has a better invulnerable save than 5, so I can't use it on half of my armies. So I feel like there's some tweaks that need to happen with the Combat Patrols. I think they're overall okay, and I would like to try again with an appropriate amount of terrain, but some armies do feel like they have a lot more juice in them than some other armies. If I played my Black Templar, because the Black Templar are like proper Black Templar, a 10-man Crusade squad throwing 50 dice if they get into close combat with something, with an attached Marshal in, like that would be unstoppable. And you get an Impulsor in there too. It's a really, really powerful one where, I mean, this guy, he's pretty good. He's pretty cool. And most of the stratagems I spent was giving this guy reroll dice for his shooting because he shoots D6 +1. And so often that meant like, I rolled a 1, +1 is 2. I'm gonna reroll that. Although there was twice in the day where I rolled a 2 for his shooting, rerolled it and got a 1. I don't know if I spent any of my command point dice and actually had it really help me out a lot. It's just, and of course, whenever you do a command point reroll, you are begging for that reroll. And I feel like fate can tell that you really need this right now. And so then the dice just do not work out in your favor. It was pretty brutal, but overall, it was a really enjoyable tournament. I would like to get into some competitive Warhammer. I would like to be good. I actually came back from the tournament and downloaded Tabletop Simulator. I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna try to get in as many games of Warhammer 40k because I wanna be good. I have won almost no games of Warhammer 40k, none in 10th edition, and I want it to change. I want to get good. I want to be able to actually move across the board, take out some things, but score my points. I had one glorious Tyranid game where I actually finished off the secondary mission deck. It was glorious. I still lost the game overall getting tabled, but it was so fun to actually do things in the game of Warhammer 40k instead of just getting absolutely tabled like turn 2. It was a lot of fun. I very much suggest playing in a friendly local tournament. It was really fun. It was also just really fun hanging out with a bunch of Warhammer people because when after about 45 minutes when we were all done with our games, we would just hang around the Tyranid players who are still furiously trying to get through all of their rounds. and just chit chat and talk about our armies and talk about how much fun we're having. It was really, really cool. And then all of us crammed around the Tyranid players, I think it was also slightly distracting them a little bit, helping to not let their games actually finish. At the very end of the tournament, they had just gotten to their turn 5 at the pencils down moments. And so we agreed with the store manager. They just played out the game like talking. They're like, I would have moved here, I would have moved here, I would have shot that, I would have gotten about this, and then they figured out their points that way. It didn't end up mattering, but it was kind of cool because we all like cheered when one of them won. It was very fun. It was a really, really fun time. And I think it was partly fun also because it was a Combat Patrol tournament. And so we had all experienced so much Warhammer that day. And the closing ceremonies, actually there was a delay on the closing ceremonies because one person took a smoke break immediately after the last round. And so we're literally all standing there with our armies and boxes waiting for him to come back in the store. And that's stuff like that. Stuff like that is what makes it such a magical time. You know, it would have been fun if I maybe placed a little bit higher than like dead last, but it had to happen to somebody. I would love to play more Combat Patrol and try out some of the Combat Patrols that have vehicles against the ones that don't have vehicles, because I also feel like having a vehicle also gives you a huge leg up. And speaking of vehicles, our Patreon has a bunch of vehicles. In this month of Orktober, we have a bunch of Ork vehicles available as STLs. We have Grot tanks, trucks, war rigs, and Grot riggers. We also make extra episodes of Eons of Battle every single week where we take a look at our viewers' miniatures and give some ideas and critiques of how to improve their painting. And we have a tier you can get your name on one of my Black Templar Space Marines, and you can hopefully join the crusade in the next tournament I play in. It was a really, really fun time, and I am going to try to get in more games of Warhammer 40k because I do want to get good. I've got the itch. I've got the Warhammer 40k itch, and I need to scratch it. And the way to scratch it is to actually not always get table turn 2. Thanks for watching.